I learned this from someone years ago. Ask 4 questions. What went right? What went wrong? What was missing? And what was confusing? And you give everybody the opportunity to speak into that. And you document that in January so that in July and August next year, when you sit down and you start planning Christmas for 2025, you start with, what were the things that went right last year? Are those things that we want to repeat? What were the things that went wrong? How do we make sure that we don't repeat those? Hey, welcome to another episode of the Missional Marketing Podcast. My name is Bart Blair, and I am joined by the CEO of Missional Marketing, Mr. Jason Hamrock. Hello, Jason.
Hey, Bart. Hey, Merry Christmas.
For a minute, I actually thought about going and putting on an ugly Christmas sweater to record this podcast episode, but it's just, it's still too hot. It's still too hot. We're going to talk about Christmas today. We've talked about Christmas in the past. In fact, if you happen to be new to our podcast, we've been doing this podcast for over 4 years. Can you believe that, Jason? Over 4 years. And our goal is to help churches grow by leveraging digital marketing and effective communications. And we are, at the time that we're recording this, it's late August. If you're listening to this in real time, it's going to be early September when this episode drops. And if you haven't started talking about Christmas, well, hopefully we're going to inspire you to start talking about Christmas. So the way I've sort of teed this up for today is that I'm going to interview you, Jason. You are an experienced church communications director. You've done it in the past. You're kind of doing it fractionally with some churches now, in addition to your role at Missional Marketing. And we have the opportunity to walk alongside a lot of churches as they plan and promote their Christmas season. And so I've jotted down some questions that I think and hope will be helpful for our guests. And so I'm going to tee you up to give us some good information. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay. Well, let's start, I think, by sort of tackling the elephant in the room, which is you and I are talking about Christmas in August, and our listeners are listening to this in September. How far in advance should churches really start planning their Christmas events? And what would you say are the first steps that they need to take when they start having those discussions?
Well, you should be doing it now. It's probably like it should be well underway, and you're going, what? It's September. No, you should be doing it now, because there's 2 times of the year, church, that matters. It's our most important holidays, right? Easter and Christmas. That's the 2 times a year people will show up to church. So make sure you get this right. It's not just another weekend. So I usually try and tell churches start in July, maybe even June or July, certainly August, September. You need to be thinking through. And it's not just, hey, let's get together, have a meeting. We got Christmas done. All right, move forward. I want you to put a little more effort into it. So for example, I think it'd be good to pull in other staff people, maybe some key volunteers, talk about what you did last Christmas, talk about the attendance, talk about what happened in January, just kind of recap what Christmas was like last year. What did you learn? What was a win? What was a loss? Then as you move into this year, here's such an important thing. My question to you is, do you know your target audience? Who are you trying to go after as a church? And if you just go, people, okay, that's an answer. It's probably not the answer that I would be looking for if I was the comm director of your church. First of all, I'd be looking at who are the people that sit in our church, right? Because that's the people we are attracting. But who is that target audience? Because everything matters. Everything matters in terms of the graphic that you might use in promotions, the landing page on your website to talk about your Christmas services, the activities that are going to happen the weeks leading up to Christmas, including Christmas Eve, the experience in the room, the stage, all that stuff, the message, all that stuff should be thought through from the lens of who's our target audience, and are we really engaging them? Are we being mindful to reach them?
I think that one of the things that I'm hearing you say is when we plan Christmas, we're thinking about outsiders first. That's sort of what you didn't come straight out and say that, but that's pretty much what you're saying. And I think one of the tensions that a lot of churches wrestle with is, do we plan our Christmas series and our Christmas Eve to be a celebration for our own people, or are we really doing this to leverage it as an outreach opportunity? And I think a lot of churches get caught on that. They'll either focus too much on their own people, or they try to do too much of a hybrid. I really think, I think personally,
Right in the middle.
I think personally, if you really want to make the event the most impactful possible, you plan it to be the most invitable event that you do in your entire year. So it means we are factoring in the people who are part of our church, but we're factoring them in as it relates to their ability to invite friends, family, neighbors, colleagues to come and experience Christmas with our church. So it's not exclusively we're doing this just for the people outside. We do need to factor in the people who are part of our church family, but we want to factor them into what's going to make this so exciting for them that they're going to want to invite people that they know.
Yeah, there's this tension in the balance between making sure that your people have that magical Christmas tradition experience, right? Because that matters. And then yet it's still for new people, right? I mean, just the way I'm hardwired is we're going after the one ahead of the 99. And so you can't obviously alienate the 99 with Christmas season. So you want to sing the Christmas songs that just hit mom's heart, right? And this is the tradition that you've got to make sure you understand. But so many people only come to Christmas and Easter. They're going to sit in your seats like, yeah, this is the story. Yep, I've heard this all over. Yep, church is no different. It's the same. So my challenge to you is, what's that message? It's not just going to make it the same. Maybe it's the gospel presentation. Mm-hmm. My church will do that. Or maybe it's something different that they haven't heard of, right? So just be mindful when you're planning this is who's the target audience? And then from there, everything else just kind of builds from there.
Yeah. So let's say that we've already been sort of working through who our target is and what we actually want to do, whether it's a series or it's multiple outreach events, or maybe our focus is just on our Christmas Eve service, and that's going to be where we're going to put all of our energy and all of our effort. Can you walk through a basic timeline for promoting a Christmas event? Like, when do we start making announcements on Sunday? When do we hand out invite cards or things that we might be printing? When do we start running ads? What are some things that we want to factor in terms of that timeline?
Well, it's a great question. So it's always that mix of when is Thanksgiving. This year it happens to be pretty late. I think it's the 28th, of November. 27th.
28th? I think 28th. I think that right the first time. Yep.
Something like it's right there on the heels of December. So I probably would start my external advertising right before then, right? You kind of want that 30-day build. Christmas is your service is probably on like the 24th, 23rd, 24th, around there. So you want to build up at least, about 30 days. So I'm looking at external ads starting them then, because you just want to get that in people's minds. And you want them to see ads over the course of the next several weeks. Mm-hmm. Internally for your people, which, by the way, it's not just come to Christmas, everybody. It's come to Christmas and bring a friend.
Right.
Come on now. Give me a handout card that I can hand and invite somebody. So I think those should happen at least 3 weeks in advance. Mm-hmm. You should really start ramping up. Now, if you do the week before we do a kids thing, or you've got stuff going on, that's where I would make sure you're planning that. So, you might want to move that a little bit further up.
Yeah. I think this is something I really just sort of had a moment of clarity last year during the Thanksgiving weekend. And that was that most people I know spend more time on social media over the 3 to 4 day Thanksgiving weekend than they might the entire 2 months of November and December, because they're off work, they have more downtime, they're spending time with family, they're posting more content over the Thanksgiving weekend. They might be looking at the content that their friends or other family are posting. And so for you as a church, whether you're running paid ads or you're focusing primarily on social media content, that Thanksgiving weekend really is a hot time for you to already be communicating what you're going to be doing at Christmas, because it gets it into people's heads. Now, people aren't probably going to make a decision on the Thanksgiving weekend about what they're going to do on Christmas Eve, but at the very least, you're using that opportunity to plant the seed while people are spending a lot of time with their phones in their hands over that Thanksgiving weekend.
Well, and they're with family.
Right. So
planting that seed to say, and you're sitting around the table and, hey, you guys want to go to Christmas? I mean, it's coming up in a few, yeah. So take advantage of it. That's great advice. Get ads running before Thanksgiving break.
Yeah. So, Jason, what you're talking about running ads? What are some like low cost or even free ways that churches can spread the word about Christmas or their Christmas experience in their local community?
Well, there's two maybe more, but two free ways I really like, and that is first your Google Business Profile. So in your Google Business Profile, just Google the name of your church. On the right-hand side, you're going to have your profile. If you're not an owner of that, or you don't know how to log into that, reach out to us. We'll help you out. We'll help you figure that out. But anyway, inside there, you can promote an event. Mm-hmm. So you can set up all your Christmas activities if there's more than one. Has a start date, a stop date. You can add stuff, pictures to it, add some information about it. That's free advertising because that goes out to like different calendar of events around your community in Google. It's fantastic. And churches just miss that. So Google Business Profile is number one. Number two, do things in like Facebook. You promote like an event in Facebook, right? Maybe an Eventbrite as well, but Facebook, and you promote that inside of your Facebook. And then you get your people, your own, staff and everybody say they're going to attend. So you do that really, really early on, maybe even before Thanksgiving. You're going to have a Facebook Christmas event. Get as many people as you can that say, yeah, I'm attending that. The more you do of that, the more it grows in Facebook. It'll get some juice there. And the other one is Eventbrite. You can set up an Eventbrite thing. We're going to have an Eventbrite. You can invite people through that. It's free. And now you can actually use that to collect leads.
Yeah, I'm a really big fan of the Google Business Profile plus Eventbrite and All Events. All Events is a competitor to Eventbrite. And I would say on those three platforms, I wouldn't go as early on with like creating a Facebook event. I think that there's a better timing for a Facebook event, probably closer to the Thanksgiving weekend. But I would say you want to create your event on Eventbrite and All Events and your Google Business Profile as soon as you have the details worked out. Yeah. It might be October, it might be September. And the reason you want to do that is that the longer you have those events online, the more crawlable they have become by the search engines. So if people are going onto Google and they're searching like Christmas events near me, family things to do at Christmas, your events have had an opportunity to actually hit the search engines and show up in those organic search results. If you wait to the last minute to put it on All Events or Eventbrite or your Google Business Profile, it's not going to show up in the searches. But if you post it early on, as early as you can. In fact, if you got on Google right now, and again, you're listening to this likely in September, and you searched Christmas events near me, you will probably already see dozens of community organizations and community events that have been posted on websites like All Events and Eventbrite and on Google Business Profiles because they're way ahead of the game. Churches tend to be a little bit behind on this, and we don't always leverage those tools to the best of our ability. So I would say as soon as you have your details worked out, get it on Google Business Profile, get it on Eventbrite, get it on All Events.
Hence the reason why you should be planning right now and getting all that locked into place. Yep.
Exactly. Jason, are there any other ways? We've talked about Facebook events. Any other creative ways of using social media platforms to promote Christmas?
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly have paid ad campaigns as well, but it's, you can run ads in Google Display Network. I mean, you and I have talked about this. Google Display Network is probably one of my favorite advertising platforms. It's super cheap. And yet that's where your target audience maybe is, right? So Google Display Ads hits a lot of younger people, like 25 to 45-year-olds, and the male to female split on the clicks on those ads is almost 50-50. Whereas Facebook is going to be a little bit older women, which is great because sometimes they're the decision makers. So now you got the best of both worlds. But I also love running ads in YouTube. I mean, YouTube, come on now, it's the second largest search engine. So I would run ads in YouTube. Now I get a question all the time about, what about Google search ads? Yes, I would run Google search ads, paid ads, but I would use the keywords of like churches near me. I wouldn't really focus on Christmas related keywords. There might be a couple, but nobody's on there going Christmas, services near me. That might be one keyword, but nobody's using those Christmas keywords. They're always using words like, hey, let's go to church. Where do you want to go? I don't know. Let's Google churches near me.
Yeah.
Right. And so you might want to run ads in December. I think you should run them year long, but in December, particularly because you can spend some money and make sure you're in there when somebody's searching for a church, because I know that that search volume goes up that time of the year, December, and then again, March and April for Easter.
Yeah. I mean, unless you're doing like a Christmas concert or some sort of like specific Christmas event that has a high level of searchability, I think you're right. Just general find a church near me, church in my city type of keywords is probably where you want to go with that. Now, we'll talk about YouTube a little bit. We in years past, I've kind of discouraged churches from advertising on YouTube. And the primary reason I've done that is because the cost is a bit higher for YouTube and the click-through rate on YouTube ads tends to be very, very low. And our goal most of the time when we're running ad campaigns is to try to drive more traffic to a church's Christmas landing page, right? So if you're building a Google display ad campaign or a Facebook, Instagram campaign, the goal is get people to click to come over to your landing page to learn everything that they need to know about the experience. YouTube click-through rate tends to be very, very low. However, I would say that in this season, now that YouTube Shorts is becoming a much, much more popular platform, you can run ads explicitly in YouTube Shorts, which means people are typically watching the shorts on the YouTube mobile app. Therefore, the click-through rate does tend to be a little bit higher than it used to be. And so I like YouTube. I like YouTube ads. YouTube ads are really, really good for branding. Maybe not amazing for a click-through rate, but it definitely gives you an opportunity to get out in front of the community with advertising and promote your brand, even if people aren't clicking through to your website.
Yeah, it's probably number 4. I'd say display ads is number 1, Facebook ads number 2, Google search ads number 3, and then probably YouTube ads number 4.
Yeah. So depending on what your budget is, I'd prioritize it that way for sure. If you're a church that is a larger church and has a pretty robust budget, then I'd definitely include YouTube in there. So Jason, what are some common mistakes that you've seen churches make when it comes to planning and promoting their Christmas experiences? And what can we do to avoid some of those common mistakes?
I tell you, the first one is y'all start too late. And you know what? That may not be your fault. Okay. Because you're not the lead pastor. But if you're the lead pastor, it is your fault. So I would say starting too late. It's like you're getting into November. What are we doing? And then by late November, let's run some ads. Too late. You need to be going on it now. So if you're a comm director listening to this and you don't have any details from your leadership about Christmas, tell them exactly what you learned here. Hey guys, I want to use free promotion as much as possible, which means I need to get this stuff in now so that it has time so the search engines, can catch it and push it for us. And if you're waiting till November, way too late. So, if you're a lead pastor, executive pastor, you're not doing a good you're doing a disservice to your church. You should be planning early enough. I mean, it's December 25th. We know it. Every year we know when Christmas is coming. It doesn't mean you have to have your sermon built, but it does mean you have to have your plans put together. That's what we need as we need the plans. We need to know what time the services are. What are we offering? What are we doing? I don't really care about the message. That can come later, but I need to know the details. So that's the first thing. Second thing I see is a lot of churches just don't plan, spend enough money at Easter and Christmas. Like those two important seasons of the year, we just don't put enough budget money towards this amazing outreach opportunity. Now, some churches will say, we don't have to, we're already big enough. Breaks my heart when I hear that. If you say you're big enough, you're doing something wrong, right? If you're big enough, you need to add another service. You need to go to another day, because as far as I'm concerned, I think the gospel is still not shared with everybody. We haven't fulfilled the Great Commission. So when I hear that from churches, I kind of push back and go, really? So because you're already full, you're not going to do anything to reach new people? I think I'd think through that a little bit more. Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox there a little bit. But that's the thing I hear about is just not enough energy, not enough effort towards Christmas and Easter. That'd be the second thing. And then this is probably one of the biggest ones that I'd love to focus on, and that is this. We talked a lot about targeting people that is your target audience that don't go to your church. Awesome. You just worked your tail off. You put all these things together in motion, and you got a lot of people in the room. What's the next step for them? If you don't do anything, it's okay, we'll see you at Easter time. I don't think that's a good answer. So I'm thinking about what's going on in January that we can bring them back. Or how can we capture their information so we can invite them to something that's really, attractive to them in January or February, right? Because we may not see them till Easter, which is the end of April or middle April. So what are we doing in January to bring people back? I'll tell you, there's a couple of churches that I love what they've done before. Sometimes churches will give like a little gift and say, hey, we're jumping into a new series. It's about families. And so here's a free thing. Come back in January, because that's what we're going to talk about, is how to have better relationships or something like that. How to manage money or something, whatever it is, whatever you're going to talk about. What are you doing to be intentional about bringing them back? And I also think you want to do something for the kids. Kids ministry should be really hot in January to get these kids to come back, so they are falling in love with what they're coming to at church. Because if you don't do anything about that, the kids don't have a fun time. Guess what? They're not coming back, because mom and dad are not going to put them through that again. They don't want to hear it in the car. So make sure it's really attractive to kids and do something intentional in January. Oh, it's so important.
Yeah, I'll comment on a couple of the things that you shared there. One is churches that don't set aside enough budget for Christmas and or Easter promotions and marketing, or pulling off the best experience they can. And I think a lot of that is because churches fail to sometimes consider those seasons as outreach or local missions opportunities. So they see Christmas Eve as another church service. They see Easter Sunday as just another church service. And so since they're just another church service, they don't really get a share of the local missions budget. That's where in my churches, we're taking money from local missions and putting it into our Christmas and our Easter budget, in addition to an actual Christmas and Easter budget, because we really want to take advantage of the missional opportunity that we have at Christmas and Easter. So as a leadership team, that's something that you're going to have to wrestle through, is what is an appropriate allocation of resources for these wide open front door opportunities that we have to connect with people in our community that we might not otherwise have the opportunity to connect with. And, how do we invest in those appropriately? So that's when it comes to the budget conversation, I think that's really where I like to frame it. Now, when it comes to the next step, this is the most common thing I think people expect, is that we get all these people to come to our Christmas Eve service, and we're automatically turning them into Sunday morning church attendees, and they're going to come to our next sermon series that starts in January. And I think when we do that, we set ourselves up for disappointment more often than not. There is some value in a sermon series that's, new year, new you, new starts, fresh starts, because there are going to be some people that are looking for that. But what I like to do when I'm planning the next steps after a large event like a Christmas Eve service is, what's a next step that's a one-off event that actually increases the level of intimacy and connection that I can have with people? So maybe it's hey, we're going to do a one-day get out of debt seminar in January, right? Because you just spent all this money on Christmas, your Christmas gifts, you racked up your credit cards, you're totally broke, you're going into the new year and you want to start fresh. What if we do a 3-hour seminar on a Saturday morning on how to get out of debt? And maybe from there, the next step is, hey, we're going to offer Financial Peace University or something of that nature. That's the next step. We're trying to increase the connectivity. Maybe it's something that is specific parenting oriented for the new year. Maybe there's something fitness and health related that you can do in January. Know what the people in your community, this goes back to the very beginning of our conversation, know the people in your community and what their biggest hurts and hangups and needs for help are, and then design something in January that actually scratches that itch for them. That's going to be your best way to move them from, hey, we attended a Christmas Eve service and we didn't really get to know people, because it's a one-way experience for most people, but move them into a new environment where maybe there aren't going to be as many people, rather than being, if your church is a church of, let's say 300 and you have 500 that come to your Christmas Eve service, because that's what you normally do. I want to move those people into an experience in January where there might only be 40 or 50 people in the room, where they're sitting around tables and they actually have an opportunity to actually meet some people from the church, initiate some relationships. And then from there, another call to action, which brings that intimacy level even greater. I've said this on this podcast before. I'll say it again. People will more likely walk through your doors on a Sunday morning when they know you, like you, and trust you. So you've already built a little bit of trust and maybe likability at that Christmas Eve service. What are the next things that you can put on your calendar that raise the level of knowing, liking, and trusting so that you can eventually move them into a Sunday morning experience?
One thing you can do just off the top of my head is utilize your app. If you can somehow utilize your app in the services, Christmas services, maybe it's a poll or something like that. Now you've got them that have downloaded your app. And there's some different companies that we work with. Studio C is one of them, where we can actually track some of that stuff, where if they download the app, now they're new, you can do a push notification to them, especially if you collect their email, and an email that follows up right after Christmas, like, hey, take this 2-question survey, or we want to learn more about how we can serve you and help you. So there's just some things you should be able to do in the Christmas services to capture the data of all people, but specifically new people who was sitting in the room, and then be strategic and do something about that to move them towards engagement. Because, right, that's what we're talking about. We want, you said it perfectly. It's they like you, they trust you a little bit, but they don't think you know them. So how do you know them? Well, the only way you know them is if you engage with them and ask them. And so, not everybody's going to want to do there. We're not trying to get, thousands of people to come to your church the next weekend. It's not the point. It's trying to get those people who really want to be, or who are moved by the Christmas experience at your church. And we just don't want them to walk away going, well, that was neat, but I guess they invite me back. Maybe we'll go Easter time. We don't want that. We want them coming back in January.
Yeah. So all the things that we've talked about, this should be super obvious, that all the things that we've talked about in sharing the preparation for your Christmas Eve service would also apply if your church is currently planning a fall festival, fall harvest, trunk or treat, something of that nature. So all the things that we discussed on this particular podcast episode, make sure that you're applying those to all large outreach initiatives that you have. And in next week's episode, we're going to be talking about planning Easter. No, I'm just kidding. Not really. But by the time you finish planning your Christmas, guess what? You need to start planning your Easter.
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, this is a game plan. This is the roadmap and the game plan for every major kind of an event. So if it is a fall fest, or it's a Mother's Day thing, or it's Easter or Christmas. See, I'll say this and we can probably end. Every church is going to be promoting Christmas and Easter. Kind of have to. Super important, super duper important. But what are those other events? Maybe it's a 50th anniversary you're having next May, right? That no other church is celebrating but you. And so you would want to pull out this game plan and implement it for that event as well. So just be thinking about that. Put together that book, that game plan book. And so you got it pulled out, 4 months in advance. We're talking about this next thing, or 5 months, or whatever it is, because we want to be prepared and do everything we talked about here. You're going to have a much more successful experience.
I actually just thought of one more thing that I have to share. I know you wanted the last word there, but I'm going to give the last word. Actually, one of the question I asked you was common mistakes that churches make. Here's, I think, a common mistake and one that you should avoid. Churches don't do an evaluation of the experience right after it happened. So the reality is you can actually begin planning next Christmas, right after this Christmas, by doing an evaluation of the event itself and how did it go? A debrief with your team, with key volunteers, the same people that you brought in to help plan the experience can be the people, or should be the people, that help you debrief it. I always use I learned this from someone years ago. Ask 4 questions: what went right, what went wrong, what was missing, and what was confusing. And you give everybody the opportunity to speak into that. And you document that in January, so that in July and August next year, when you sit down and you start planning Christmas for 2025, you start with, what were the things that went right last year? are those things that we want to repeat? What were the things that went wrong? How do we make sure that we don't repeat those? What was missing? What was confusing? How does that direct us next year when we're planning our Christmas Eve experience for our community? So, avoid missing the opportunity to do a debrief. In the church world, we tend to finish something and then we're running right on to the next thing. And you can really do yourself and your team a great favor by spending some good time doing an evaluation of how things went, open, honest feedback. Ask those 4 questions so that, you can get some honest feedback from the people who've been a part of putting it together.
Yeah. Great advice.
Okay. All right. Well, let's land on that. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Missional Marketing Podcast. We will not be talking about Easter in next week's episode, but you can expect us to be talking about Easter very, very soon. If you haven't ever left us a rating or a review wherever you listen to the podcast, make sure that you do that. And if you haven't subscribed, you definitely want to do that so that you don't miss any future episodes. Until the next episode of the Missional Marketing Podcast, I'm Bart Blair, and on behalf of Jason Hamrock, thanks for tuning in.